Okay, so welcome back to part 2 of my Digitakt 2 review series. Now, in this one we're going to be going over some tips and tricks and fun things we can do. Some of this will apply to Digitakt 1 and some will be exclusive to the Digitakt 2. The first thing I want to talk about is how to properly chop breaks on the Digitakt, and for this we're going to use something called Digi Chains, so I'll show you from scratch how we can do this now. Okay, so I'm in my DAW of choice now, which is Renoise, and it has a really good sample editor, so it's great for doing stuff like this. And I have an Amen break, which I've already processed, and I've compressed it and EQ'd it and ran it through the Akai, so I've kind of got the Amen sounding as good as I can before it even goes into this slicing process. So the next thing to do is obviously slice up all the hits, and this is just the way I like to do my breaks, is have lots of control and program all the little individual hits of it. So after that I'm going to go slices and destructively render slices, and then I can get rid of this first chop, and what I've essentially been left with is all the individual hits of that break. And then in Renoise I can right click and go save samples as, and if I just come and save them to my SSD somewhere. Okay, so I've got all those chunks saved away, and now I can start dragging them into Digichains. But what you will notice is when you drag stuff in, they order them a bit randomly. It's just whatever comes in first will be at the top, and you can order by file name, but there's also the problem where if you drag in 10, it goes after 1, so it is a little bit clunky to work with actually, this program. So I've got A, B, C, D, and then E will have to come up to F. I can drag that down, EF. The next thing to do is you want to click maybe like a 16th note. So I can see clicking 16 here that it's going to give me 2 space chains, but I only want 1. So I'm going to go for a 30-second note sort of resolution to this chain, and then I'm going to download the space chain. And I think it's quite important to use a transfer app for this and not record it in, because you want that audio to be precisely the right length so that when it does even divisions, it will slice it up evenly. So you've got to use a transfer app and then just drag it onto the Digitakt. And then now in the Digitakt, I can just come into a track and load up a new thing, go and find that sound, drum breaks, tutorial. And in this, all I've got to do is set the machine on grid mode. And then I come and I set the length of the grid, the slice grid, to 30-second notes. And so now, if I put the keyboard mode on, so as you can see, we can actually get all these slices spread up and down the keyboard in the way we want them. We've just got to go through a bit of a convoluted method to do it. But why this method is so superior to the old one of having to lock a sample start position, or the other one where you just have one shots of the hit, is because you get to have all these hits up and down the keyboard. And so when you actually connect a MIDI keyboard to this, this is kind of the workflow, is you can hold a trig and set this. I've set this to an 8th note at the moment, and so I can play, I can find the hits on my keyboard whilst holding this trig and set the trig there. That's the hat, that's a snare. I'll find another kick. So one thing is the actual BPM of this looks really slow, so if I speed up this pattern to 170. So we've instantly got a pattern. I can paste this out, and then maybe I want to go and put one of the shuffles in. So it's so quick to program, and it's really fun. Like, this is a really, compared to the stuff I do in Renoise and Logic, all the ways I sequence my drums, this is one of the best ways to do it. This is kind of the workflow, and why the Digitakt is amazing. I just wish they would give us a proper slice function so we have more control in the actual Digitakt. What's cool about this technique, and one of the reasons why I love to slice breaks up at all the hits, is you can do some cool tricks with it. And so one of the first tricks is you can actually tune the break up and down and it will retain the groove, or you can actually change the BPM and it will retain the groove. So I can do that. I can actually come into BPM as well. One of the other benefits of slicing all the individual hits up is you can actually gate the break, and this is very easy. You just come into the amp page and pull the hold time down, and then we can play with this decay. One interesting thing you can do to advance the trick with decay is actually sort of the problem is you can't really quickly whip in between two positions. You sort of have to scroll for whatever it is, half a second to get from one to the other, and you really want to snap these two values so you can jump into a choppy bit and then back out. And one other way you can do this is actually just set amp volume as an LFO and have it on a trigged mode and then a slow rate. And what this does is a very similar thing. It's going to trigger every time the note hits, and it's going to let through a little bit of the audio, and then it's going to clamp down on the rest of it. And so what essentially we can do is, by pinning this to either the start or the end, we can either increase the level, it sounds a little bit like a compressor, or we can actually cut it and make it choppy again. So if I show you the sort of difference here. But the cool thing about this is we can hold the function button and flick between one value to the next. Whereas in this one, you would never be able to do it with such precision. So that's a cool little thing to throw in there as well. One other thing I love to do with decay is to make some custom ghost snares from the snares, the main snares in a break. And in the Amen, you have this kind of main wacky snare. But if you take that snare and copy it to a new channel and then pull the volume down a little bit and pull the decay down, we can make a much more sort of snappy snare. And it sounds good, even though the Amen already has ghost snares in. You can make your own custom ones, and it just gives you more variations and ways you can program the break to make it sound cool. Another cool thing I've done in this tune is actually with the pads, and what I've got is two pads. So I've tuned them together. They're both playing chords, but I've tuned them to the same key. And then I have one with a sort of a bandpass, quite a steep bandpass filter, which is being modulated. So the filter frequency is being modulated to go from side to side. And so we get this sort of sweeping filter, sort of phasing filtered pad sound. And then this layers on top of the other pad. So it gives it all that nice shimmery movement in the high end. One useful way to get around the problem of ping-pong loops is actually just to use the forwards and reverse, and we can use these trig conditions here. So I can just set this, hold like a parameter, and then I can set that to reverse. But actually you have to function hold it, so it's like a whatever it's called, a trigless trig or something, and it's yellow, so it means it's not triggering a note, it's just triggering one of the parameters. So you can essentially just lock the reverse parameter and lock the forwards one, and you can hear I've done it with this vocal to extend the vocal. Now the problem with this technique, and why I really want to have proper ping-pong loops, is you're always going to get some clicking, and you can sort of nudge around these. Like you can see I've nudged this one around a little bit to try and make the clicking as camouflaged as possible, and you don't really hear it in the full track, but it's not ideal. So this is one way around the ping-pong loops, which is going to have to be good enough for now, I guess. There's something about the Digitakt workflow that makes it really good for finding little chops of records and vocals, and this is such a simple technique that probably everyone will know who's used a Digitakt 1, but actually just locking the start and end points on vocals and scrolling through a vocal take, so you can see I've just locked this start condition. And so what I would do is keep trying to find new trigs, and so locking the start points and then maybe even like reversing that hit. And you can really easily find new hits and move on to another one. Maybe if I actually copy that one there to a new pattern, paste it in, and then keep scrolling through. It's such a good way for finding little chops. So just locking start position with the trigs is a really good technique on your vocals. One final trick I love to do is actually for creating effects, and you can make effects from pretty much any sound source this way. And what you do is essentially use a forwards loop point on a sample, and then you actually use sample tuning, and so you kind of pitch the sample up and down, and you can get really interesting results. So what I'm doing here is I'm also panning it to give it a bit of stereo width, but the main thing I'm doing is in this sample tuning, you can create really cool dub effects with a slightly faster sort of rate here. Also, if I switch to something like a saw wave and have it going from high to low, so essentially what it is a forwards loop on any sort of sound source. Sometimes quite a fast forwards loop if I speed this one up loads. And then having pitch go from high to low, usually a triggered pitch movement from high to low or fast from side to side. And so that's really it for me actually. I will do much more on the Digitakt in the future, but I just wanted to cover a little bit of ground with the break chopping and a few little tips and tricks in this video. So thanks for sticking with me, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace!